Welcome back to College Football Addiction. Drake Cetol locked on Big 12 with us today. Drake, a report, a rumor, a little bit of a storyline came out that the Big 12 should be looking to add a couple of ACC teams. Obviously, we talked about the settlement with Florida State, Clemson, and the ACC. We've kind of projected out what that might look like in 5 years, who may be going, who may be staying. But is the Big 12 still open for business, even if it's 5 years from now?
The Big 12 is very much open for business, and less than 5 years from now. Dan Wetzel of Yahoo Sports brought this up, saying that the Big 12 is a perfect match, in essence, with Pittsburgh and Louisville, and I think the conference would agree. If I am Brett Yormark, here's where this becomes very realistic. Louisville is the fifth most watched team over the last 5 years in the ACC. Pitt is the ninth most watched team. They're sitting around that same spot as North Carolina State or Georgia Tech or Duke, who could be a very good addition, Virginia Tech as well as the Big 12 Conference. And the reason Brett Yormark will want to strike is because the price tag is getting cheaper and cheaper for those schools to leave the ACC and come to the Big 12. And if you want stability, stability is found in the Big 12 Conference. We're going to give everyone an equal revenue share. We're not going to give you revenue share based off of how many viewers you get. We're not going to cut your revenue share based on how many viewers you get across the board. Whether you're Utah, West Virginia, BYU, UCF, or Louisville, you're going to get the same amount. And that is something that's very enticing because a school like Miami 20 years ago would have benefited tenfold from the ACC's new algorithm. They're not today. The reason being is when your program starts to decline. Earlier, when you were good, the algorithm sounded great. That bonus structure was great. Now that you're not good anymore and you're making less money, that's where this entire thing starts to teeter and it's unsafe. And then you learn that it's a $75 million cost to get out of the ACC in 2030. Clemson, Florida State, UNC are going to pay that. If I'm Louisville, if I'm Pitt, and I want to stay alive, my first call is Brett Yormark, and Brett Yormark should pick that phone up 10 times out of 10 and say, we will bring you in on a full share. You know, I've brought up on my show, if Oklahoma called the Big 12 and said, hey, we want a share and a half. We want a share and a third. We'll come back to your conference, pay us more. You could probably do that just for the brand power of Oklahoma, having a perennial contender, a historic blue blood in football. I don't mind that. But when you can get Louisville, who is a king, they generate money even when they stink at both football and basketball. People just love sports in Louisville, and the football team has been on the up the last few years. Their basketball team, as good as they are, also bring in a massive price tag. Pitt, with a rivalry against West Virginia, would finally elevate West Virginia, and you don't have to give them extra money. They'll both take equal shares to everybody else and be plenty happy with that. TJ, one of the points I really want to hit on here. West Virginia came into the Big 12, and a lot of us remember them as being very good at football. They were in the Big East. They came in the Big 12, and in the last decade, they haven't carried their weight. No. There's no two ways around it. They fired two coaches in the last 10 years. They haven't been in the AP Top 25 since like 2018. They never were under Neil Brown. They have not adjusted well to the Big. They are the Texas A&M of the Big 12. Yeah, a couple good years here and there, expectations, but they never delivered on it. The way the A&M went to the SEC and has not delivered. They need a rival to come into the conference and lift them up. Utah coming to the Big 12 immediately helped BYU. Now they have even more to play for. Our rival is here. Pitt being in the Big 12 is like when there's an orphan kid. Do you send them to the orphanage with or without their sibling? If you send them with a sibling, things are probably going to be a little bit better. Pitt can be that sibling that lifts West Virginia out of where they have been these last 10 years in Big 12 play. This across the board is a positive for the Big 12 Conference. Dan Wetzel of Yahoo Sports, who mentioned this on his podcast, is spot on.
So I guess maybe a logistics question is, I wonder how they would be able to, because, you mentioned the $75 million at 2030. It's $18 million a year more every year you back up, right? So it's 93 the year before. It's, let's not ask me to do any more math than that. So
111, I think.
Yeah. You're asking a lot of me at this point. 111, then 127. How would the Big 12 help with that? Because I don't know that Louisville could afford that at that moment. Are you asking ESPN to jump in there? Like, how is that feasible?
Private equity is going to be huge here. Private equity is going to be huge when it comes to any of these investments. What this becomes is Brett Yormark goes to the table and says, hey, this is an investment. I know so many pundits, so many very good reporters, very articulate journalists have talked about how it would be bad for the Big 12 to sell its soul. I am still of the mind. Venture capitalists, bad idea. Don't love it. Please no. Being the All-State 12, billion-dollar contract, 10 years, branding completely reformed, that's fine. That's great. Go do that. Then at that point, you're looking at All-State as the table saying, hey, here is where your investment's going to pay off. Here is where your sponsorship's going to pay off. We are going to invest by bringing Louisville, by bringing Pitt. How much does the Big 12 pay of their exit fee? That's where we start getting in the conversation of tampering. And I don't know exactly, like legally, if the Big 12 conference could help them, because now you're in essence assisting with them paying to get out of their grant of rights. And that just sounds like something that's probably not very legal today. And what are the repercussions if you do that? Do you accrue a fine if you're the Big 12? Is that fine worth it? A lot of question marks, a lot of semantics. There's a lawyer in this country who probably knows way more about it than me. The logistics of this are certainly tough, but we just saw Texas and Oklahoma do it. We just saw the entire Pac-12 from Stanford and Cal to Washington to Utah to Colorado. They all did it. It is not, how do I want to put this? It feels easier than ever right now to exit your conference and enter a new one if it's best for your school. And with that, the Big 12 can capitalize by bringing in Louisville and Pitt, even if it takes dancing around some red tape.
Are there other teams that you think would fit really well in the Big 12? Maybe that's a good way to wrap this up. I mean, obviously, yeah, the Big 12 would love to have a Clemson and Florida State. I don't know how realistic that is at this point. North Carolina, some really big brands and stuff. But are there other programs you feel like kind of along that mold of Louisville, why they make sense, Pitt, why they make sense, and whether they're ACC or not, just other teams that you think would fit in well?
Yeah, so it was the Wild Ute who tweeted out a list of where their brand initiative viewership share figures sit for the entire ACC. Florida State, Clemson, Miami are the top three. Georgia Tech at 4. I think Georgia Tech brings in they're not a very good football program right now, but the eyes are there. And as long as the eyeballs are there, that's going to help you with TV contracts. And Atlanta is a great thing to have in your back pocket. Louisville is in that 5 spot. They're a good addition. I think Stanford at 6, UNC at 7 are both options that aren't on the table for the Big 12 right now, but NC State at 8, Pitt at 9, Virginia Tech at 10. So Georgia Tech, Louisville, NC State, Pitt, Virginia Tech seem to be the schools the Big 12 would go after first. That leaves Duke, Syracuse, Cal, or Virginia, I should say, Wake Forest, Boston College, SMU probably out of the picture. And hey, maybe you do. If you're going to add 5, why not add 6? Include SMU in that and say, hey, pay your own way for a few years. If you have a free team who's going to the college football playoff and brings in DFW, you're not going to complain about that. And they're a rival with Houston, with Baylor. And then what if you do consider Duke in basketball? I mean, there are semantics when you get to that 5 or 6 team mark, but I know guaranteed the Big 12 would benefit day one from Georgia Tech, Louisville, Pitt, Virginia Tech, and then throw NC State in that fold as well. This conference would not lose money by having those teams, those schools, and therefore I think Brett Yormark, who is the ultimate businessman, who's always open for business, would strike if those universities say, we are willing to make this move to get out of the unstable ACC and come to the very stable Big 12.
Drake, where can people follow you? You're not leaving or going anywhere, so we appreciate that. But where can people follow you, find your work?
At Drake C. Toller, at LO Big 12 on Twitter, and wherever you find your podcast with Locked On Big 12.
Appreciate you, man.
Always fun, TJ.